Good afternoon. Well, yeah. Oh, you're very good at that. You were taught well. Appreciate y'all being out for Reflections program. That's the first issue of the fall, and welcome. Certainly, it's kind of a good day to be inside, so that worked out nicely. I have to. Let's see. Got one up here and a couple back there. Okay, there we go. All right, we're good, Jim. Thank you. Uh, Before we were sitting up here chatting with Jim and Janet, and the title of the characterization of them was the dynamic duo, and the only comment Jim had to make was about Superman, and he said the kryptonite ran out years ago. Welcome to Jim and Janet Davis. They've been residents in Brandon Oaks since what, about April, February, huh? Oh, I know okay, all right. Well, anyway, a long time now, long enough to get to this status. Both are Virginia natives, and they, as you all well know, they are very active in our community and the activities and the offerings that we have. Jim was, both of them are Virginia natives. Jim was educated in college administration, advanced degrees. He's a teacher, he's a writer, he was active in mission work. He served 3 terms as a Virginia delegate, and we thought he had good sense. Yeah. He was president of Shenandoah University at Winchester for 26 years. Janet was educated in music education, and she capitalized, became a teacher in music education. She was primary in raising 2 sons and a daughter, and they moved here from Florida, which they're very proud of. I think they said Bradenton, yeah. Uh, they're going to tell you about who they are in more detail. So I will just say we'll welcome the reflections from the dynamic duo.
I'm getting instructions from my wife, which is pretty common, these days. After working all those years with a full-time administrative assistant, the day I retired, she looked at me and said, "I ain't doing that." And so I knew right away I was in trouble. What a delight to be here and to see so many of you. Janet commented she was looking at, and after 7 months, I think she knows the name of every one of you. I won't promise you that I can do that, but I do recognize almost everyone here. So it's a real pleasure to be here, Brandon Oaks. I thought for my part I would actually just talk about a few themes, and I told Janet she's got a microphone, she can turn it on, and she can add anything she wants to add as well to my comments, and unfortunately I'll be able to do the same to her. And as far as Buster's concerned, I got the mic and I get the last word, so we're not finished with him yet anyway. Well, starting off, those pictures tell you a lot of the story. They don't tell you the early childhood part. And just briefly for me, grew up in very rural Southwest Virginia in the big town of Sugar Grove. Population probably 150 when everybody was in town. Graduated from high school with 23 in my graduating class. Everything was personal. Everything was close up. Church was very important. My whole family was brought into the United Methodist Church when I was 12. Even my father, which I Didn't think he would ever do that, but he joined the church, and he was very active for quite a few years there at Wharf Hill United Methodist Church. School and church was the story of how I grew up. We knew everybody knew us. We all worked together. We did Lord's Acre sales for the church to have money to do things we wanted to do. My grandmother lived in our house along with her last child, and so we had 7 or 8 at the table all the time during the week. And then on the weekends, we had about 18 to 20 because my mother's brothers that she helped raise when her father died all came to our house every weekend. Not most weekends, every weekend. So it was a real family affair, and family relationships are still the thing that I value probably most in my whole life. And you heard Buster mention a few things that I've been able to do in my life, including being in the General Assembly of Virginia, being president of a university, traveling all over the world, literally. And yet I realized all along that family was what was really important for us. And now that we're here, it's even doubly important. And it was one of the 2 or 3 primary motivators to come here. We learned rural self-sufficiency. I slaughtered pigs. I helped slaughter a calf. We raised rabbits and chickens, and we raised a garden that we used to barter for eggs and other things that we didn't have regularly. It was a true self-sufficiency lifestyle. We bought very little in order to never be hungry, and never had more than 2 sets of clothes most of the time as growing up, but that was sufficient. So that's the tradition that I come out of, and always trying to have concern for other people. I always had a college expectation. My mother and father had a 4th grade and 7th grade educations. Never had the opportunity, but they believed that their 3 children at that time, 4 later, was going to actually have an opportunity for higher education. So my sister graduated from Radford and taught for 35 years, grades 1 through 2. She's retired and still living. My brother went to college, has a master's degree in counseling, in addition to an undergraduate degree, coached basketball for 35 years at 4 different levels, from high school all the way through Division I. I obviously had great opportunity as well, earning an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a PhD. And all of that out of a little rural community and a family that had not had very much opportunity. So that's a wonderful Andrew Carnegie type story if you want to look at it that way. But after reading Americana and being in the Seekers the other day, I learned that a lot of my upbringing was certainly influenced by a number of books that I had really not paid that much attention to. Well, education was the way our family had opportunity. Teaching, coaching, and for myself, college teaching and college administration. And it's been an important part of our lives throughout, and it'll continue to be a very important part of our lives. As we now have, as Janet will tell you, we had 10, have 9 living grandchildren, and we have 5 of them already in or through college, and the others are lining up and are hopefully all going to be able to have that opportunity. I learned also in early years, taught by family and by school people, that competition was for things like athletics and games. Cooperation was for everything else. And you can mix those two up really easy because a lot of people think that life is a football game. And I find that very disturbing, and it's one of the things that I like to always try to do is find common ground and solutions to problems. So if you are in meetings with me, don't be surprised that I am always working in that direction. Also, place and stability were very important to me. And I had 2 jobs, basically two institutions I worked for in 40 years. Stability of family, stability of activity was always very important. and still is, as a matter of fact. I love public life. I was in the public eye for 50 years. Since coming here, it's kind of fun to be somewhat anonymous, but I still can't completely get away from it. City Council appointed me to the Mill Mountain Advisory Committee recently, and I'm happy because I don't think there's been a year since I first ran for the House of Delegates that I haven't served in public life in some capacity. And it's something that I preached to students, and I would say to all of you, there are plenty of opportunities if you think things need to be improved. Secondly, I love physical activity. I was very athletic. I played basketball throughout my college experience. I love tennis. I love golf. All of those things were an important part of my life. But I always tried to remember that, you can be very competitive in those games. But when you walk off that playing court or field, you need to think then how you're going to work with everybody to make this a better place to live. And finally, I love my wife of almost 55 years now, and that's been a lot of stability as well and a great joy. And I'm perfectly happy to be here at Brandon Oaks. Janet.
I'm not quite as good as he is at speaking spontaneously, so I have a few notes. Let me get my notebook. We've been married almost 55 years. Wait a minute. We were married in 67, so whatever that makes it. In December, okay. So anyhow, I will start with just a few comments about my childhood. I also grew up in a family with 4 children. I was the middle of 3 daughters, and then our baby brother came along later. My mother was Evelyn, and my father was Raymond Copple, C-O-P-P-L-E. And we were born, and my family lived in Richmond, Virginia. And we lived very close to my maternal grandmother, just 4 or 5 blocks away. And actually, Grandmommy, as we called her, Grandmommy was the only driver in the house. She had a car. We didn't. I mean, not him, but my original nuclear family, we didn't have a car. So my father, who worked for the post office, rode his bicycle. We lived down by Bryan Park in Richmond off of Old Hermitage Road and Lakeside Avenue. So we were right outside of city limits. Anyway, so Daddy rode his bike to work. Just as Jim said that the church and family were the center of his life, that was also the center of our lives. Our church was the center of both our spiritual and our social lives. As a family, we were brought up in the Southern Baptist Church, big Baptist church, which became later on the buildings to be used by the Baptist convention that broke off from the Southern Baptist back some years ago in Richmond. So at any rate, we were at the church Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday evenings for dinners, Bible schools in the summertime, children's choirs. Anytime there was something going on musically, we were there. My father and mother were both musical. So our gifts came down through that genetic pool. My sister's here, and she shares that same genetic pool wherever she is. I don't see her right now. There she is. Barbara Beatty. You've all met Barbara. Anyhow, that experience in our church and with our family laid the foundation, really, for my love of music. We didn't have much money growing up at all. Daddy worked 2 or 3 jobs. He sold table pads door to door. He worked for the U.S. Post Office, and then he served as choir director in several small churches from time to time throughout our childhood. So he was making do. Mom was a stay-home mom. Anyway, we sang. We made a lot of music. So neither Barbara nor I had very much in the way of private instruction, I guess you would say, in playing the piano or singing. Most of our experience came through doing in the choirs, high school choirs and middle school choirs, church choirs. So that was the way we started in music. All of us in our family were educated in the public schools, and I'm happy to say that. I became a public school teacher in my later years after college. And so I would give kudos to my middle school and high school choral teachers because they introduced me, even more than my family's experience with music, they introduced me to the classics of music. And we ended up singing in foreign languages at Hermitage High School and some of the other, some real classical pieces that are still sung in the world today with 4-part harmony for high school singers. So we had a really strong education in our public schools. So then off to college I went, left my sister at home. She was the third of the girls. So we never lived close to each other after I left for college in 1963. I graduated high school in 63. So I went to Mary Washington and spent a year there and then decided to move back to Richmond and still majoring in music, as it were, at RPI, Richmond Professional Institute, which you all know now as Virginia Commonwealth University. So I was there when I ended up being introduced to this fine gentleman to my right on a blind date that was kind of initiated by our mutual friends. So that's a long story, but anyway, we had our first date on March the 17th of 1967, probably about the time that first picture on the left, okay? He was a senior in college, and I was working and going to school part-time in Richmond. So that was March 17th, 67. We married to the day 9 months later, December 17th, 1967. So that was the beginning, okay. And then, I don't know, church pictures. I think that second picture was probably in some church directory, yes. I don't know where the third one was. Anyway, they are all church pictures, I think. And then down here, we came into Shenandoah days, down on the bottom. And you see the Golden Gate. We'd gone out to California there to visit Jim's college roommate. So we spent some time there. And the last two pictures were right before we moved up here from Florida. So, and then most of you know little Gracie. So that was the day we brought Gracie home from the rescue. Yeah, she was about 6 years old, sitting in our house in Florida. And so she's still with us and blesses our lives. That's why we named her Gracie. Oh, yeah, we can do that. If I know how to do this. There we go. So this shows you a little bit. Virginia is for lovers, you know, as they say. Both born in the Commonwealth, married at Locust Grove United Methodist Church, right up the road in Salem. There's a long story involved with that, but it's primarily because Jim was in graduate school at Tech. I was working at Richmond, the Baptist Foreign Mission Board at the time, and we had time just between quarters to get married. So the fellow I was working for at the Baptist Foreign Mission Board drove up to Locust Grove and married us on a Sunday afternoon. It's just right up the ways. 2 of our 3 children were born at Lewis Gale. And Jim was employed at Ferrum College from 67 to 82. So we moved, right after we got married, we moved to Ferrum College and stayed there all those years. All the children were born while we were there. No, that's wrong. That's wrong. Oh, my gosh. The first one was born when we were in Florida, in Tallahassee, when Jim was in grad school in 1972. So then we came back to Virginia. So then he served in the House of Delegates. Let me move this on. I'm talking too much. Whoops. Okay, this picture was taken on the Capitol Square in Richmond on a rather windy day. And that was when he was in the house. That's what he looked like. He was very, very young. Of course, I was even much younger. Actually, we were born the same year. Okay, so the one in the middle, Barkley, he is now 50 years old and has 5 almost grown children. And then Andrew is an elementary principal in Loudoun County, Northern Virginia. They're going to move down towards the lake soon. And Stephanie, the little one in the little snowball there, she lives at the lake now. She was 43 yesterday. Yeah. So anyway, a little bit about my work experience, and then we'll give you some time for questions if you like. My first job was to work at the Baptist Foreign Mission Board during the summers between my years in high school and first year in college or so. So I had the lovely experience of meeting lots of missionaries who had come home from their sabbaticals and what have you. So I learned all kinds of things about the world at that time. And I worked in the records department down where the archives were. So I spent a good bit of my time doing microfilming of old letters from the 1800s when the missionaries would handwrite their letters and send them back to the Foreign Mission Board for the records of what they were doing on the field, mission field. So I sat with a microfilm and I'd read those old letters from the missionaries. It was just a wonderful education for me. So I worked there, and then what did I do? I went on back, finished college finally, and got a degree in music ed, bachelor's in Bachelor of Science in Music. And then my first teaching job, believe it or not, was down in Franklin County, just below us here. I was an itinerant music teacher, and I served 5 schools every week. So I was going in my little VW bug all over the county with my big LP records and my songbooks. Never had a music room, so I was going down the hall to each room, teaching and wearing out my voice. But anyhow, it was a wonderful experience. I met what I would consider the rural folks, country folks, because I grew up in suburbia in Richmond. So it was a good education for me, having married Jim, to be involved with these wonderful children who were out picking tobacco sometimes back in those days. I actually worked in 2 schools that were still segregated. So it was right before the time of total integration. So have you all read the book or heard about the book True Vine? Okay, I taught at True Vine Elementary School. It was a black school. And I taught at Lee M. Wade in Rocky Mount, which was a black school for the town kids. And later they, of course, were integrated. So I did that, and I worked in some churches, choir directing, playing the organ, took some organ lessons in college, and graduated. And then when we moved to Shenandoah, we had the 3 children. There were some expectations for me as the president's wife, which there are lots of stories I could tell you about that. But what I did know that I was supposed to, as the president's wife, I would show up. I would look nice, if possible. I would be nice. And I would not talk too much. So now I'm not the president's wife anymore. And I can talk. And, I was very careful with my opinions. Okay, I had to be. So at any rate, now there is a certain amount of freedom as we are now in retirement. So anyway, that's a good thing. I've lost track. But anyway, let's see what's next. Whoops. Oh, let's go to this is the whole family, almost the whole family. A couple of years ago, so some of the body shapes have continued to grow. But we have 3 grown children, 9 living grands. We lost one little baby to a genetic flaw, trisomy 18, if you know anything about that. And anyway, one of these grandsons is married. 2 more are getting married next year. So we have a large family whom we love ever so dearly, as you can imagine. Okay, so the one thing I have missed since moving to Brandon Oaks is that before we left Florida and before the pandemic hit, I had taken to mentoring in the public school in Samoset Elementary, which was one of the schools that served totally below poverty level families. Every child in the school was below poverty. Multi-ethnical, Latino, Black, mixed races. But I absolutely loved going into the school. I met one day, I went into a third grade class. There was a teacher, Miss Kennedy, had a little clutch of young girls sitting in the back, Latinas sitting in the back. They had just come to the school. They couldn't speak English. She was, the teacher, of course, had her plans, and she was working as hard as she could. And so I asked Miss Kennedy, what can I do? She said, take these little girls out in the hall with a little magnetic board and the ABCs, you know, like you would put up on your refrigerator door for your grandkids. She said, teach them the ABCs in English. Of course, they were speaking in Spanish, and they weren't dumb. They weren't stupid. They just didn't know English. So I took those children out, and I worked with them week after week after week. And one of those little girls just had the most remarkable sparkle in her eye, and I said, this child is eager, eager, eager. So long story, I got the teacher there at the school, the ESL teacher, to call her mother and say, I have a lady here who wants to volunteer to help your daughter after school. I knew if I called her, she wouldn't understand. I couldn't get through to her. So anyway, long story, again, I started working with that little girl. I went to her house, a little trailer that I was afraid would blow away this past week. Worked with her from third. She's in seventh grade and blooming, and her little younger daughters, her younger sister is blooming. The family's doing well. The father's a roofer, puts on the cement tile roofs on the 110-degree weather down there, working hard. Anyway, it's a lovely family, and I miss those little kids. So I'm back over now at Hurd Elementary, mentoring with the children over there and backpacking lunches to send home. So that's my social justice, teaching, music, interested in the well-being of children that are our neighbors, and they are our children. They're all of our children. No matter what, they're all a part of us. So, any questions?
Sugar Grove is in Smith County, Virginia. If you go out west past Withville, you can either turn and go to Rural Retreat and over to Sugar Grove, or you can keep going to Marion, take Route 19 and go south. And if you do, and you keep going, you'll be in North Carolina fairly quickly thereafter. The Rye Valley is a beautiful spot in Virginia. That's where the little town is. And most of my family is buried up on the hillside in Rye Valley, looking out over that beautiful valley. Other questions? I'll just say one word. Yes.
One more. I
Ben.
forgot to put that one up there. You can talk about that.
Okay, I will.
I wonder if you'd share with us the good news before you left Bradenton, Florida. Sold your house.
Well, just very quickly, we came up to visit Brandon Oaks because we were talking, when should we go into a retirement community? We knew we were going to, it was just a matter of when. So we came up to spend time with family and came by here and started talking with them about what was possible. We thought it'd be a couple of years before we could get anything we wanted. And before we left that day, we had put down a deposit on the apartment in the corner up there on the second floor, which we love, actually. It's a wonderful space. And we went back home thinking, well, now we got to get organized and whatever and sell the house. Well, I walked back into the house, and my neighbor came across the street and said, "You know, I heard a rumor that you went up to look at a retirement community." He said, "If you ever sell your house, I got a friend who wants to buy it." And I said, "Well, we've signed a deposit, so if he wants to look, you better come because I'm going to have to list it." He came that evening, about an hour or two later, and he looked around and he said, I want to buy your house. And he didn't ask me the price. He didn't ask anything. I said, "How soon?" He said, "As soon as you want, it's cash. I'll pay for it." And finally he said, "By the way, how much do you want for it?" And I had done some research already, and it was a premium. I'll be honest, fair, but a premium. And it made possible paying our entry fee and everything here that would have been a little harder had it not happened. So it's a wonderful story. Everything fell into place so fast that our heads spin, to be honest with you. And coming here, we weren't worried about making friends because we knew in the short time that we were here visiting, we met enough people that we knew we would be happy, and we certainly have been. This slide, just a quick word about that. On the left is little Chris Tucker. He was a child in the Henry Evans Center there in Winchester, which is a home for abandoned children. And my son, Barkley, started being a big brother for him. Unfortunately, he became a big brother his senior year in high school, and then he took off to Syracuse. And here was this little 9-year-old boy that had the worst experience in those 9 years that you could even dream. So I said, I'll pick up where he left off, and I'll become a big brother. And we came very near to adopting him. He came to live with us for about 6 months in the house, but from age 9 to all the way through high school, he was part of our family. When he finished high school, he went off to New York and has made a living, and he's running a major seafood restaurant right down on Times Square in New York now. And we've stayed in touch with him. The other guy over there was another interesting thing. We took a French student, and by the way, we took a student every year from somewhere in the world for the summer or half a year. But this one in particular, Xavier, was from Grenoble. And he came back 5 years in a row and stayed with us for at least 2 months. And so he sort of became part of the family. He has a degree in hydrology, and last we talked to him, he was working on one of the big oil rigs out in the North Sea. So we've had a wonderful experience with taking people into our home, and we are still hearing from them, to be honest with you. Yes? They made it through just fine, and our neighborhood just had a few limbs and a couple trees blown over. It's a house that's got cinder block with steel rods. The rods go up over the roof, and then the tiles went over top of that. It was built for a hurricane, and it had shutters on every window. And you had to put them up, obviously. But in that house, one of the sad parts is we had invested a lot of money putting a completely solar system and a solar battery system on that house to where we had no electric bill, and we had 3 days of protection regardless of what happened because those batteries would have run the house for 3 days. So the gentleman who bought the house got a real bargain in that one. Was there any other question? Are there any other questions? I'm going to finish with just one comment. The General Assembly experience for me was life-changing. I had paid attention to what's going on in our country, and I'd had just a very limited opportunity to go abroad. I lived in Panama for 10 weeks one summer, but I was sort of unprepared for what you deal with when you're elected to public office at that level. You deal with every subject you can possibly imagine, from life to death to whatever. And the education you get carries over into every part of your life after that. When I became president of the university, I had friends in every jurisdiction in Virginia. I mean, not just casual friends, real friends, because you bond in those situations. Now, things have changed a lot in the last 10 or 15 years, as you know, with partisanship and divisiveness. But I saw that democracy can work extremely well if people are willing to commit to cooperating and working together. And I still preach that all the time, and some of you will hear from me as we get into conversations. I know we got into a couple the other day in the Seekers and other groups, because I feel so strongly about public service and public life that I hope all of you are registered, all of you vote. And I was a little disappointed we didn't run a bus to the last primary voting, but I'm certainly sure we're going to do it November 7th, and I'll be there to greet you if you come over to Direly to the Covenant Church. I work the polls, and any of you that are willing to consider that, I urge you to do it. The only problem is it's a 4 a.m. to 8 p.m. job.
Is it safe? Yeah. Is it safe? We are indeed blessed to have Superman and Wonder Woman as our neighbors. Thank them. That's it.
Thank you. That's it.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Buster.
Delightful.